Welcome and thank you for taking time out of your day to join us. And thank you. I want to say thank you to the folks who helped put all of these together. So Abby Richards has been a graduate fellow with Community Plus Values. She's been on screen and behind screen in much of what we've done. So Abby, thank you. Chase McNamee, who's our senior project manager for Community Plus Values, also been just wonderful. We have some terrific folks from our IT department, Tremaine Fisher. We've had Philip Reddick. We've had a couple of other of their colleagues here and there. Denise Redfield is here today behind the scenes doing our captioning. So I want to also make sure to just kind of say thank you. I know that it takes a lot to get these off the ground and running. So thank you all for doing that. And, you know, Community Plus Values was a project that was started about 15 months ago on campus. And the purpose of it is really to create a sense of belonging, to know that you're cared about at DU, to know what your colleagues are like and get to know them a little bit better through these webinars. We're showing some of the expertise that we have in our community, which is pretty terrific. So today we wanted to, you know, I've been noticing reserves are low for a lot of us right now. You know, we're having to dig deep and yet we're already at the bottom. So one of the ways that you know, we think that people can really fill those reserves is through creativity and words and language and expressing and connecting with ourselves and with one another. So this week we wanted to just kind of take a deep collective breath together and do some listening. Creative expression is important for wellness, and so this is what we're bringing you today. So we have two terrific guests here. We have Blake Sanz. Do you say Sanz or Sanz?
Sanz.
Sanz, okay. So Blake, who is a teaching associate professor in our creative writing program, has a degree from Notre Dame. My dad went to Notre Dame, so I have to call that out. My uncle, three of my uncles and my dad. And has published stories in national literary magazines, including Ecotone and Puerto de Sol, and has won scholarships and fellowships to attend Bread Loaf Writers Conference, Sewanee Writers Conference, and the Sozopol Fiction Seminars in Bulgaria. Done some cool traveling. I realized yesterday, like, we can't travel anymore. And I mean, I've known that, but somehow it sunk in yesterday that I really can't get on a plane and go the places I want to go. And it was, so maybe we can go there through some of writing. It's a good place, good way to travel. So a recent collection of your stories was named, got you named as a runner-up for the Flannery O'Connor Award for short fiction, which is issued by the University of Georgia Press. Congratulations. I think that that's a really big honor. When Jennifer Karras suggested you for this webinar, she brought that up. So that's really cool. I'm glad you're at the University of Denver. It's nice to have you. Bobby LeFebre is an award-winning writer, performer, cultural worker, fusing a non-traditional, multi-hyphenated professional identity to imagine new realities, empower communities, advance arts and culture, and serve as an agent of provocation, transformation, equity, and social change. I don't typically read bios here, but when they're written like that, you can't help but do it, right? His work has appeared in the New York Times, Huffington Post, Guardian, American Theater, Magazine, NPR, and on poets.org. In 2019, Colorado, I want to say that you were honored, but I want to say that we were honored for you to get to be named our 8th poet laureate. You were the youngest and also first person of color to hold that position in the 100-year history of that position. So I think I have mixed feelings about firsts like that. So I want to celebrate it, and I also want to acknowledge that what took us so darn long, right? And may you not be the first and only. So you have a bachelor's degree in psychology from Metro and a master's degree in art, literature, and culture from DU. So thank you for being here as one of our alums. I think what we're going to do today, so remember that you have the closed captioning option in your Zoom functionality down at the bottom. And so use that to the extent that you need to. It might be particularly interesting to do that on a day like today with us focusing on language and word. I think what we're going to do first is just have each of these guests give an opening piece, an opening thought. So Um, I don't think we had an order picked. Would one or the other of you like to go first? What's moving you?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll jump in. First of all, let me just say I'm really honored to be included on a panel with Bobby. It's a real thrill for me, and I'm really excited to hear what he has to say. So thank you, Bobby, for being here. I'll just give a little brief background to what I'm going to write or read. So I've been working on a novel for a while, long before the pandemic, about a monk and about his cousin, who is decidedly not a monk. Um, and they're sort of rivals in their family. And as the pandemic hit, I started to realize how much there was that I was saying about the monk and his cousin that felt relevant to these times. And so what you're going to hear is a little bit of this monk at a young age, probably in his mid 20s, coming to the monastery for the first time. And it's strange to read this in these times when all of us are basically monks in our houses, not going anywhere. So I tend to think of that when I revise, and that's the stage that I'm in with this project. Anyway, this is about 5 minutes worth of that section of this novel. He's just gone through the routine for the first couple of times of being in this monastery. The routine worked like a cleanse, and Damon took to it like he'd once taken to the Cajun idiom of his mother. His brief and aimless post-grad life dissipated, replaced by bow of head and bend of knee. It wasn't lonely. He felt God's presence in the quality of his own movements and incantations, which took on the measured awareness of a fish in a tank. His search for God was rewarded with the emergence of a perspective that attuned him to the sacredness of this solitude, these surroundings. Prayer became the air he breathed, purer than oxygen, and in the absence of the old distractions of ambition, he levitated above the minor irritations he faced in a day's work in the field with the goats, in the bakery with his dough, at the computer with his code, making a website to record for posterity the nature of this life in a way that, he proudly imagined, was the modern day equivalent of first millennia scribes. The only surprises came in the form of small revelations over Sunday communal meals, their one weekly chance to talk. Though they all three shared a sense of purpose, their personalities remained obscured, for the order asked him to prioritize his relationship with God over human connection. This didn't mean that he overlooked the quirks of his brethren. To the contrary, it didn't take long for Damon to notice the prior's anxious beard scratching at news of the bakery's dwindling supply of flour, or Javi's overly nasal laugh at table banter not meant to be funny, or how father sniffed with irritation whenever brother Javi said something banal, or his own habit of muttering, under his breath at the prior's insights, which Damon imagined, if he didn't tone them back, might be received as a blatant form of sycophancy. Only after his second Sunday did he register that such idiosyncrasies might repeat the rest of his life. Was it Nietzsche who had posited the theory of eternal recurrence? Damon felt like he'd read about that in a novel once for an English class, or else maybe his cousin Tommy had enthused about it in front of him. Over time, for better and for worse, the weight of such tiny gestures would mount. He would have to observe father's beard scratching forever. He would have to listen to brother Javi's ridiculous nasal laugh forever, even his own mms. This gave him pause, not about his commitment to the order, but about the potential for intimacy with his brothers. Even if Carmelite observance was more about greater intimacy with God, even still, these would be his only people so long as he should live. Yes, the quiet of a full week could be sacred and wondrous, but in the aftermath of that second Sunday meal fraught with trivial tensions, he saw that the silence of this life could also be as loud and distracting as a bell that never stops ringing. And yet, in how father responded to Damon in weekly check-ins, Damon saw that he was getting it right. In those meetings, Damon reflected with precision and acumen on the nature of the Carmelite scholarship he had been asked to read, on the practical intricacies of work in the bakery and the fields. Father's responses to his reflections, his subtle smile, his kind eyes, told Damon that he was successfully managing this most dramatic of adaptations. He felt the truth of his success in the new aptitudes he was acquiring. Within a month, he had learned the delicate alchemy of accounting for a day's humidity and portioning out the dry ingredients for anise biscotti, the nuanced subtleties of Lester Little's scholarly tome on the role of religious poverty in medieval Europe's spiritual practices, and the unique behavioral characteristics of each of the 7 goats in their humble flock. He grew accustomed to the gathering of sweat at the small of his back during the worst of the heat, while moving the small herd from one acre to another in the midday swelter. He memorized the Adoration in Latin, the Angelus in Spanish, a nod to the prior's Cuban childhood, and created a graceful fix to a problem in the HTML code that would allow for a cleaner homepage visual. With a gentle sidestep en route to the chapel one morning, he vouched for the life of a caterpillar, feeling God's gentle pat on his back as he did so. Rather than wither, his curiosity bloomed within the confined space of the arid campus. He came to know the peculiar smell of the dogwood beside his private cell, the acrid shriek of a prairie hawk at dusk, and the intimate silence of the night when it blanketed the sky with darkness. Just after the great silence began each night, he took a full 15 minutes to stand outside and look up at the stars. If what he had wanted was to feel communion with God, then he felt it most acutely in those moments when the desert seemed to have been created just for him. Though that vanity, too, he quickly learned to strip away. The desert was for every living thing, and it was selfish to imagine otherwise. He felt a part of the functioning ecosystem of the land and the hermitage both, and everything unfolded as it should. His communion with the prairie, with the campus, with the routine, with God, it carried him across the heat with a giddiness akin to a young man on his honeymoon. All the while, in those first months, he lived inside a consciousness he recognized as his own from late adolescence, from his high school basketball team's locker room, from listening to rap as a white suburban kid, from his quirky alone time in the dorms at Tulane, studying for tests. It was a consciousness that included phrases like, "This shit ain't right," at the sight of a messy workstation in the bakery, or a "hell yeah" at learning of a tasty Sunday menu, or "man, that's whack," while watching a frog nab a fly on the path to the chapel. In small moments, these linguistic holdovers punctured the holiness he felt. They reminded him of his own profane self, which he accepted and did not challenge in the face of his new life, even if he had to laugh at how those old turns of phrase sounded here. The bridge from the old daemon to this new hermit was tenuous. Through these phrases, he was holding on to something dear, only lightly though, never imagining for the first moment that it would mean anything to him if he were to drop those words to the dirt-packed earth and never turn back to pick them up.
I want to say thank you. My dad, who went to Notre Dame, you don't know when you're going to be visited by people, but he actually spent 7 years as a Carthusian monk.
Oh.
And it's a portion of his life he's never talked about. So I think maybe I got a little window into my dad. So
Maybe so.
Yeah, that was really great. Thank you so much. Bobby, I think we're going to turn it over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for that passage. That was great. And thank you for having me. You know, we are, like you said at the beginning, you know, we're in the middle of unprecedented times as a nation and as a poet and as poet laureate in particular. I feel a certain, I don't know, responsibility, right, to utilize language and art as a tool for social dialogue and a weapon for social change. We're watching all of these things unfold before us, right? The global pandemic in this country, we are sort of reckoning with all of the sort of ideals that this country avows, but religiously falls short of manifesting. And in a lot of ways, we're doing it all from the comfort of our homes, right? And so I'm going to start with a couple of poems for the times. I'm going to do 3 short poems right now. As COVID started to, you know, take hold, as a writer, your instinct is to write, right? And then as a human being going through all of the emotions that everyone else is going through, sometimes we just have to give ourselves time to take it all in and process as well. So this time has been both fruitful creatively and very introspective. And I think that that's fine for all of us to take that time to really check in with ourselves and figure out where we're at and how we're doing. But this is the first poem I wrote in quarantine after, we were sort of relegated to the house, and it's simply called COVID-19. The sirens are sounding. The screams are loud. The virus has packed its bags. World traveler without a passport. Borders are man-made. Walls cannot contain life on the move, but that's another story. Asian businesses were empty before our streets. Racism. The toilet paper is gone. Panic begets panic. My 3 p.m. meeting is now a Zoom conference. Tom Hanks is raising his hand. Let's talk about the poor. 30 million uninsured, ends meet public transportation to get there. Self-quarantine, privilege, paradox. Blue collars can't work remotely. Hourly wages, side-eye the salaried. Go ahead and cancel school. Childcare is a killer too. Industrialized without a heart. Developed without a conscience. Capitalism gaslights, blames our bodies instead of broken systems. Wash your hands, cough into your sleeve, plutocracy lampooning universal health care. Call on your God or whatever. Just don't touch your face when you make the sign of the cross. And so, that was sort of my initial thought. And then as time progressed, I found myself in the position, like a lot of us probably, who had a certain privilege to stay home, to work from home, to do everything from home. And in that sort of piece that I found, I was thinking a lot about, there's an Instagram page that I followed called the Nap Ministry. If you're not familiar, go to Instagram right now and type in the Nap Ministry. And it's really radical Black feminism around reclaiming rest as a sort of revolution, right? Because capitalism does teach us that our bodies are machines, that we should always be producing, and that if we're not producing, our worth is less, right? So I wrote this poem as sort of a walk into a certain piece that I was feeling about being home and contemplating and not having too much affected me, and the privilege in that, right? And when there is nothing left to do but live, let us retire the noise and build a home inside the stillness. Grab a wrench and unfasten the parts of you that have become mechanical. Rest your weary limbs in the bed of anomaly. Outside, the machine is powering down. You can hear the birds when the gears aren't grinding. When there is nothing left to do but live, make a vacation of your body. Each part explored, a stamp on your passport. Begin with your heart, maybe. Crawl inside and sightsee. Ask difficult questions about who it is and why. Outside, the machine is powering down. You can hear yourself when the gears aren't grinding. When there is nothing left to do but live, simply show up. That has always been enough. And together, in this sudden strangeness, radical imagination will run wild, tomorrow being built today. And then the pandemic continued, and we're still in it, and all those good things, and multiple things in the media caught our attention and activated us in ways that were maybe shocking. And one particular moment that really bugged me was the incident that happened in, I think it was Central Park in New York. A white woman was walking a dog off leash. A Black man who is, frequents that park, nature watcher, asked the woman to put her dog on a leash because, there's things around there that could be trampled, and that dog wasn't supposed to be off leash. She sort of seemed to weaponize her white privilege, called the police, and was fabricating things about this Black man. And we know in this country what happens when white people fabricate things about Black men. And so I started a series of poems throughout the pandemic called Numbers for Days. And so I have a series of poems that appear in number form. And this one is about that incident. 1. Karen has a gun. The gun was given to her as a gift. Karen accepted the gift with a smile, the same smile her parents and grandparents wore. After all, the gun is an heirloom. Karen takes pride in what she's inherited. 2 weeks after I bought my first home, Karen, walking a beagle or some shit, interrupted me as I was looking for something in my car. My car was parked in my driveway. the driveway in front of my home. Drawing her gun, she asked, "Excuse me, what are you doing in that car? I see you. I'll call the police and they'll be here faster than you can run." 3, Karen knows how to shoot. She doesn't fear the recoil. Karen doesn't always use the gun, but she's been trained how. Karen knows what a target looks like and how to load a magazine. Round 1, "Can you please stop? I am a white woman." Round 2, "Sir, I am asking you to stop. I am a white woman." Round 3, "I'm taking a picture and I'm calling the cops. I'm a white woman." Round 4, "I'm going to tell them there's an African-American man threatening my life. I'm a white woman." Round 5, "He is threatening me and my dog. I am a white woman." Round 6, "Please send the cops immediately. I am a white woman." 4, Karen was studious. She learned her colors early. Karen knows what white means, and black, and brown. Karen knows what red looks like, bubbling out of the holes of a body lying on the ground. That's my time for this first part.
Thank you so much, Bobby. Right. Do you usually have applause at the end of your spoken word?
When I read something like that, it's like awkward applause because people don't know whether to clap or like just sit there and be quiet. Sometimes poetry that gets to you that way confuses you, which I think is a good sign. So when it's a mixture of like snap, clap, silence, I'm like, okay, yeah, I hit.
Okay, right, like.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm just going to say it. Like, as a white woman, I have to come to that with a lot of humility and a lot of learning. So, yeah, I don't know that I feel like clapping. I feel like saying, "Holy shit, I need to learn."
Yeah.
Learn even more. So, all right. Well, you both, we could almost end this for me because I feel like I got a lot to go process and think about. But of course, we have 50 other people who'd like to hear a little bit more. We wanted to just spend a few minutes and talk about sort of your experience and your process and really make intentional that connection between wellness and creativity for folks and do that through your journeys and asking you some questions. And then we're going to do a little bit more of your craft here in a little bit. So let's just kind of jump into these questions. There's so much out there that talks about how creative expression supports mental wellness. I think it also probably by connection supports physical wellness. What does that look like in your lives? Can you kind of share with us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, creativity, I think, is one of the most innate, raw, experiences that we have as human beings, right? It's a way for us to channel the human experience and play and imagine. And so when we talk about centering wellness, that exploration is important, right? We have to figure out ways in which we navigate the world around us to maintain some sort of balance. And the better that we can be in something that we love or that we're engaged with, I think that helps a great deal. And so me as a writer, I have the privilege of all of my creative work is in addition to all my other, I do so many things, right? In my bio mentioned that I'm a multi-hyphenated human being. And so I've always used my creativity and my artistic practice as a balance against the things that may be going on in regular life. So in addition to all the creative stuff, I also work in social work. So I manage a team of social workers and I do this very difficult work. And then I escape through, poetry and acting and all of these other things that I've been able to activate in that way. But I, especially working with young people, watching young people have the opportunity to engage with creative outlets, you really get to see what happens when the human mind is able to kind of roam free for a little bit, and it is an escape, And so when we're talking about wellness, we have to talk about ways that we utilize creative means to get to a point where we feel whole. I think I don't know, Picasso or whatever says we all kill a child at some point, right? An artist, because society teaches us that we're this mechanical thing, and that, dreaming and imagining and playing is looked down upon. You're not as whatever as someone else if you're spending your time in the clouds, right? But
Right.
beautiful things come out of that. And I think our wellness is attached to that.
Yeah, I guess, I think about this question in terms of my mother who lives here in town and who's extremely devout. And she's also been through a lot of issues around mental illness. She's been sort of in an asylum for a while now. She's out and she's doing very well. But she's having this crisis of faith where she says that when she prays, she can't figure out if anyone's listening. Um, and as mostly an agnostic myself, I struggle with how to help her with that. And she's been going to this spiritual counselor at her church, um, who gave her a book by a Jesuit, which is supposed to help you think about how to pray more, like less in terms of some formal prayer and more in terms of like how you would talk to a friend. And to my mom who was raised pre-Vatican II in the Catholic Church, like this is blowing her mind. And so I went on a walk with her recently, and she said, "Oh, I asked her, I was like, well, how did that book feel to you? Did you feel like you were getting something out of it?" And she gave a long pause and a deep breath, and she said, "Well, I think it's going to take a lot of imagination." And I thought that that was really profound. That all of us, especially these days, we go around talking to ourselves in our houses all day long, saying all kind of weird shit to each other, or not even to each other, but to ourselves, right? But really, who are we talking to? Like, it takes some imagination to figure that there's someone out there who would, what kind of person is listening to that, or what kind of being? Um, so that's the connection that I make between like creativity and spirituality or well-being, is like to say to yourself that it's okay to imagine. And then in fact, there's something sacred about it. Um, if you put your own, prison of a workday in front of the Zoom camera into that perspective and think in terms of imagination and give yourself the license to imagine things. At least for me, that's something that I have found has been useful for me, apart from anything that has to do with actually creating on the page, which is its own kind of, as Bobby describes, escape or catharsis.
Right. I love that idea of giving permission. I think it's important. And I'm also Catholic and grew up in a pretty Catholic family. And I'll never forget, a few years ago, I was really struggling with faith, and I went and saw this priest, chatted with him about it. He works in the parish downtown, Holy Ghost, and I was talking about, it was Lent, so right before Easter, and Catholics and Christians have that sort of 40-day period of contemplation and sacrifice. And I said, I'm really struggling with this. And he said, you know what? I think you need to give up for Lent. And I said, what? He said, you just need to give up church. He said, you need to go find God where you're going to find God. And maybe that's in nature, maybe it's in writing, but having that permission. So I really appreciate that you're giving that permission. And Bobby, you talked about like letting the human mind run free. So maybe we could say that between the two of you, we got the permission to let our minds run free a little bit, which is probably a huge gift. So tell us a little bit about each of you. How'd you get into your craft? How did you fall in love with this work? What led you there?
Yeah, I came to, the first time that I engaged in anything artistic, I was in 8th grade. Mrs. Allen, who I still credit with really introducing me to the world and the life that I live now. She put me in a play in 8th grade for National History Day. There was this competition where you take a theme from history and you make something with it. And so I actually came into the performing arts through theater, to literature through theater as an actor. And then I started, learning more and writing on my own and kind of growing in that way through high school and into college. And hip hop culture was also really paramount to shaping my idea of figurative language. So I was listening to, music that was steeped in metaphor and story and all of these things. And I was starting to understand better the power of, figurative language and how it can shape worlds and create identity. And it wasn't really until I hit college that I really started taking literature classes. And it was in my, Chicano studies and African-American studies classes where I started reading writers of color. And I was like, oh, there's stories out here that exist that are, you know, that resonate with me in this way. And then I started reading more, and I started writing more, performing more, and then it just sort of went on from there. And that, you know, went on to an understanding of what craft is, what culture is, at the same time looking at the structures that art and culture work in as well. And so I've gone from, you know, actor to poet to, you know, screenwriter to playwright. And I also do a lot of administrative work in the arts. I'm on multiple boards and commissions, locally and nationally. And so the whole ecosystem of arts and culture I view as craft, because things move in all directions, and I try to find where I fit into that ecosystem.
That's really cool. I like that you think about the process and the ecosystem you're talking about as having its own creativity. Yeah. Blake, what about you?
I think it has to do just with a way of seeing the world, you know, that gets cultivated when you're around certain kinds of people. For me, I think, like for Bobby, there were certain teachers in my past that had a lot to do with, I guess I would say again, like granting me permission to like see things a certain weird way. I'll shout out to Coach Kelly in high school, and I'll shout out to John Bigonnet in college as people who gave me that permission. I think Flannery O'Connor talks about the habit of art and how like what comes with that is like the need to see things in a different way somehow, and to cultivate the habit of that. I was driving this morning to a friend's house, and I stopped at a light, and across the way there was a woman who I've seen. I mean, I've lived here in Denver for 15 years. I swear I've seen her at like 25 different bus stops in the city. And this is the first time I've seen her post coronavirus, and she was wearing a mask. But she was, you know, she had her bags next to her, like her grocery bag. She was out front of the grocery store. And, you know, normally I don't drive, I take the bus to work. And so you get to know certain people, and I haven't seen any of those people in a really long time because I haven't been taking the bus because of obvious reasons. But she's still taking the bus, right? And so just to see her at the bus stop was to be flooded with this kind of like way of thinking about what life in Denver has meant for me for 15 years. And I'm thinking about that at the same time that I've just spent 2 hours this morning working on a paragraph in this novel that has to do with solitude, and it has to do with what kind of human connection is important, even for a monk, or especially for someone who's sort of hedonistically living their life. So to see that scene while I'm working on this project is to see it in a certain light. And I think, you know, if we're going to talk about the habit of art, it's that habit of learning to perceive things in terms of something that you want to make true. And I would say that that's sort of like what's important to me when I think about getting into the craft of being a writer.
Can I add to that? I think one thing that especially young people or people that I work with as a poet, you know, a lot of times people are like, oh, their poetry scares them in a lot of ways, right? Because it's this thing that's viewed as this inaccessible thing. And I tell people all the time, and you know, what Blake's saying is like, so much about being a poet isn't even about what you produce. It's really about how you see the world, right? Because you can activate your mind to see the world in a way that is poetic, and that's poetry, and that makes you a poet. And so, I mean, all it really is you're connecting two things that seemingly don't have a relationship, and you're marrying them, whether that's in your mind or on the page or anywhere else. That's what poetry is, right? That's what basic metaphor is. It's an internalization of the world around you, and the recognizing of that. And so anybody out there who might be listening who's maybe wanted to try poetry, begin with your own thought process and have fun in the ways in which you are taking in and distilling the world around you, because that's where the art lives.
I love that. So how has art and creativity helped you build community? I think in a project where we're thinking about that, creating a sense of belonging and community more richly and inclusively throughout DU, I'd be curious about how art could play a role in that.
Yeah, I can start. I guess I think, seemingly art making, especially for writers, is seemingly like a very isolating process. But you always have to keep in mind someone else, right? You're writing either for an audience or you're writing to share something, or maybe not. There's stuff that we keep to ourselves that nobody ever sees. But I think that by nature, art is a form of communication, and communication builds community. And those things, when you're intentional about it, you can employ those things in a way that is intentional about whatever it is you want. All of my work surrounds, is dealing with issues of community, of power, of privilege. And I think that it can be activated in that way, especially for writers of color, because I think that so much of our work are used to be maybe rooted in trying to scream, to show people that we exist, right? To validate our own identities. And when we move past that, and we create it because we want to, or we need to, or that it's culturally something we've done from the beginning of time, we stop caring about canons. We stop caring about what rests in academic spaces or museums. And we get back to the human connection. And whether that's through performance or visual arts or dance, it has the innate power to connect with people on an emotional level, on a visceral level, on an intellectual level. And that can create, solidarity among people, movements. And I think that's why we're seeing right now that music and is being utilized like it always has at the forefront of movements. Visual arts, you look at these signs that are being, held at protests, that's art too. So it's a really organic way to bring people together and create community. And I try to do that in everything that I do.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I think in response to that is what you said, Bobby, about like writing being on its surface a pretty lonely endeavor. There's a certain amount of time that you have to clock alone, or at least in the way that I write, that's the way that it goes. Um, but it's not just that I'm like drawing from life and putting it into my art, but art, I think, feeds the life too. There are certain projects that I'm a part of that do make it feel like art and community are one. I do a little work sometimes at a homeless shelter here in town at a writing center that DU's writing program runs. And that work involves like helping people at the shelter come up with resumes, but it also, a lot of times they're less interested in that sort of thing and they're more interested in, here's my life story. Can you help me write it? And they'll just sit down and you won't have to say a word. They just start talking. It's sort of like what Bobby was saying. We all have this innate desire, it's very human, to just like have people hear our stories. A half of life is just being witnessed, right? And so, I try to help those people tell their stories. And along with graduate student Allison Turner here at DU, together we created a podcast called whenyouarehomeless.com, which was our ability, our shot at like interviewing a bunch of the people that we had worked with and giving them a voice, giving them a chance to tell their stories. And so just listening to those stories, helping them shape them, giving them a voice, that felt very communal, in a way that is very different, I would say, from whatever sense of community I create by writing a novel, which may or may not ever be published, which may or may not ever be read. There's always that fear when you write that you're writing in a silent room, that no one will ever see the light of day of what you write. So I actively pursue that kind of outside artistic expression as well. It sounds like, Bobby's got a long history of doing that, which is amazing. And I'd imagine that, would you say, Bobby, that provides you a certain different kind of satisfaction than you get from writing a poem in your room?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's the cool thing too about the performative nature of poetry, is that it's a little of both. You could spend the isolated time creating it and then you have an audience to share it with, and so that does help because, yeah, I don't know. I think it was Baldwin. He said the writer's grief for something is appalling. And I'm paraphrasing. He basically said that in some respects we need and want everyone, and in other respects we need no one at all, right? And so I think that's the constant push pull in what we do. But yeah, I find joy in different doing different things because it activates different parts of myself in the community.
Thank you both. So we're going to give you a little bit of time to share a couple of more pieces, and then I want to invite everybody who's listening and watching today, please pop your questions either into the Q&A or into the chat. And I think we'll have hopefully about 5 or 10 minutes at the end to get to some more questions. All right.
Yeah, so I'm going to read another poem. This one's a little longer. It's just one. Everything that's happening right now, there's this metaphor always about us coming to the table, right? Who's at the table, who's missing. And I wrote this poem a couple of years ago, and I've been reading it a lot lately to contextualize the way that a lot of us who have been engaged in movement work and anti-racist work and are feeling right now, because it's amazing that there's so many people that are coming into consciousness and doing the work, but it's also exhausting for those of us who have been saying these same things and pushing anti-racist, work. And so we have to sometimes I wonder if I even want to be at the table, or if I just want to, imagine something new. So that's what this poem's about. It's called The Table. Come, all of you, and gather around the table. Bring with you the heavy luggage society has unfairly packed for you, the bags overflowing with barriers you have somehow ingeniously figured out how to navigate. Or if your bags are a bit less heavy, or are filled to the brim with privilege passed down like an heirloom, bring them too. Do not fret if you feel your cup is empty, or if your china is encrusted with gold, for today we'll treat this table as an equalizer. Today, honest conversation and selfless action will be the food that nourishes us. Before we sit, let us pass our stories around like bread. Take a piece for yourself, but always be conscientious. Ensure there is enough to go around. For some know, there's not always enough to go around. Or maybe there's always been enough. Maybe in the back, in the rooms where the food is prepared, there is a surplus of things tucked away from the grasp and eyes of the peering. Stockpiles of things, cannily sharing a wall with moaning scarcity. Maybe the meal was designed this way, where some are intentionally invited to the helping, others intentionally left off the guest list, no seats pulled out or given up, no place setting bearing their name. And if you're not invited to the table, as they say, it is possible that you are on the menu. And those without seats, those tired of being consumed, have this collection of your ugly we have been saving for moments just like these. Boxes filled with old bones and new blood. Attics packed with epithets and mason jars full of scars. Cedar chests stacked with broken treaties and the nooses tied around our forefathers' necks. We keep under our beds the sting of your water hoses and the no dogs, Negroes, or Mexican signs you once flew proudly like flags. Buried in lockboxes beneath our fruit trees is the barbed wire of your internment camps, the bars of the prisons you built salivating with us in mind. We have, next to the extra Virgin Mary candles in our closets, the gods ripped from our grandmothers, the languages you choked out of our throats. We store in file cabinets next to broken olive branches the names of family and friends deported, the names of family and friends banned, and you wonder why we grimace when we taste your apple pie. Why the sweetness you savor is too bitter for us to swallow. You wonder why we kneel when your flag is raised. Why our bald fists still have to punch holes in your pretty blue sky, because we know that what the machine hasn't already swallowed, it will most definitely be coming for. Tractors with growling bellies and flesh between their teeth. This disease that runs rabid through them, this unquenchable thirst for things that are not theirs. Your tables are not new to us. These tables you asked us to fashion but refused us to sit at. Our hands and feet and hearts know them well. This perk of being the builder, this perk of baptizing the wood with your sweat. In your rearview mirror, you can see us coming for you. But we're not aiming for your head. We're aiming for the humanity that lives somewhere in the basement of your heart. Our very existence is ceremony. This struggle sewn into our being, this survival radiating from our resilience, this joy we make space for despite the sting. Do not be surprised if we ask why the invitation was late. If we show you we've built a table of our own, one we fashioned out of necessity when we realized yours wasn't large enough to hold us. Do not be surprised if we hand you a wrecking ball before we do our voice. If we ask you to dismantle the comfortable place you sit at as we watch, then when we are both left standing in the rubble of what used to be, Let us weigh our pieces until the scale is balanced. It is not enough to have a seat at the table. One must be the designer of it. So let us destroy to rebuild anew. Let us unpack our bags, lend each other our ears, and gift each other our hearts. For listening and loving are foundations to understanding, and conflict does not have to be combat. Conflict can be a supple garden that change grows in, so let's grow things together. Let us sit at a new inclusive table, pass our stories around like bread, eat, be fed, be healthy, be valued, and truly be heard.
Wow. That's like a ride. Thank you. Whew. All right.
Yeah, do you want me to just follow that? I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, that was amazing. Thanks for sharing that. I'll be thinking about that all day. The piece that I've chosen to end with here for myself is just like, spoiler alert, the monk leaves the monastery. And at the end, he's about to go out into the world. And I thought, this passage is really raw, so I don't know if it's any good, but it felt too relevant to the times to not try to read it. Essentially what I have here is just what I would call an incomplete list of things that this former monk is thinking about might be a part of joining the world in 2020. So I'll just give you that. The sound of a phone buzzing, moving across a glass tabletop as if alive. The sight of people in a park walking their dogs. The sight of the dogs themselves, let off leash and bounding toward a plastic disc hovering in the sky. Scanning the radio while driving, hearing the station identification. This is listener-supported WWOZ in New Orleans. Where you at, baby? Sitting inside a parked car, texting. The crunch of someone else's popcorn in a theater. The whispers of their guesses about the plot. The snug feel of a leather belt and the click of dress shoes against linoleum. The feel of piano keys depressed, their give beneath his fingers. The pungency of his mother's perfume. Neighborhood fences, waist-high and white, wooden and picketed. Gables poking out from the roofs of suburban houses. The house uptown, seat of all family holiday gatherings. Bookstores, ice cream shops, hiking trails in the mountains. The rumble of a cat's purr against your ribcage. Accelerating into a turn. The sting of chlorinated water in your eyes after a cannonball. The pock of a tennis ball hit over a net. A framed Degas hanging on a wall beside a window. The white noise at the beginning of a cassette. A ceiling fan's whisper in a still summer room. The crush of a pillow between your knees in the middle of a night. Scratch of fingernail into carpet. Clang of bar against weight rack. Lullaby of sirens in a city. Cities. Maybe he would live in one. The gym, farmers markets, arts festivals, parades, open-air concerts in the half-light of dusk. A botanic garden with bonsai trees and bougainvillea and sagebrush. Public pools and the chatter of children floating on inflatable plastic donuts. High schools hosting basketball games in their gyms. The players' high tops squeaking as defenders call out their man and parents cheer through the echoey space. Packing a duffel for the gym, shoes on bottom, change of clothes on top, socks in the side compartment. The internet, experienced from the front end. Filling out a Facebook profile for the first time. Taking pictures of his first apartment, his first walk through a neighborhood, his first purchase at a store, his first day at a job. And uploading all these for people to see. The adrenaline rush of seeing likes accumulate for all those firsts. Writing them a message. The infinite scroll, the suggestion of an old friend from high school, thumbing through their feed, writing them a message, hearing back. Is that really what they look like? Cat videos, cat memes, internet cat language, endless highlight reels of insane NBA dunks and assists, David Blaine magic on a loop, a sunny afternoon on a patio with a phone and a dozen Instagram accounts to flip through, automatic bill payment, postcards and junk mail, flyers, furniture that arrives piecemeal in a box waiting for you to assemble it, instructions for setting up your TV, TV on demand, coasters, a can of soda, a ball game on TV, a neighbor's lawnmower through the window, or maybe he would rent an apartment in a complex, shared cackle through a wall, sound of sex above, the look of trees from above their tops, whirl of other people's pipes. Long hot shower in the middle of a weekday, black coffee in a mug on the drive to work, email back to a boss, you got it, I'll have it by the weekend. A newspaper, the scatter of its info held in two hands, the act of being witnessed. Someone watch me solve this problem. Someone watch me notice this landscape. Someone show me you see it too. Choosing from among a few pairs of jeans, choosing from among a few destinations, actually going to them, stopping for gas on the way, how the nozzle clicks itself off when the tank is full, Spotify the rest of the drive, suggested songs that match the mood, the sight of a billboard by the side of the road advertising how many miles to the next hotel, arriving somewhere and stretching your legs. Hell of a day, isn't it? Said to a stranger, their smile back. Some notion of a private living space, rented or bought, thud of feet on ancient hardwood, buzz of electric toothbrush, painting a wall the soft blue of his childhood bedroom simply because he can, the pasty sound of a paint roller brush as it catches on the shallow pan, absorbing the sticky paint. One of those crazy razors with 5 blades, gliding across his bearded face like a squeegee over a dirty windshield. The world's clutter, scattered across a table, bought at a furniture store. A double bed, luxury of a nightstand, missile beneath the lamp, a window that looks out onto a street, a couple outside the window, reminiscing about a night out last week. The sounds of those voices carrying to him on the wind, the proximity of so many stories. Wouldn't it be something to be a part of all that?
Awesome. I feel like I just want to listen. We have a great question that came in. Nancy Jones, who's here and is just a treasure, a DU treasure, and happens to be a CWC grad. I have to shout out to you, Nancy. I'm so proud that you graduated from DU and CWC this last spring. So our question is, what are your tips for letting the mind run free? Give us a couple of quick tips, and then I know you both have some short pieces you want to share at the end. So maybe your top, 1 or 2 thoughts on this, and then we're going to jump into those last pieces.
Yeah, I would just give one, actually. We schedule Zoom calls for happy hour. We schedule Zoom calls for work. We schedule things all the time, right? I think that the most fruitful that I've been in allowing my mind to run and to allow that space, in addition to when it happens organically and just being able to follow that. But like, I was talking to a friend of mine and she actually suggested you have to schedule time to imagine too. In the world that we live in, sometimes scheduling time to disconnect and allow the mind to go there without fear or interference of anything else is the most effective way. And I've been trying that. I've been setting a time, on my calendar. Hey, this is the reminder. It's time to dream a little bit. And it's funny to get a notification on your phone that says it's time to dream, right? You put everything away and you go to a place of in your home or in a park or wherever you feel that you can, float off to for a little while, and you do it. Or you allow yourself, we feel things like there's energy that affects us, from time to time. And when you get an idea, when you have something that you are thinking about, sometimes you just have to sit with that, and that'll take you, to other places. So 1, schedule it. It's kind of fun. And 2, let it happen when it happens. If you have the ability, and just follow it, like, don't fight it.
Cool.
A lot of walking alone without your phone. Even in the apartment here, like, I pace this apartment like back and forth. And there's something about the movement that I find like gets my mind to feel like it can think about things other than what it's supposed to. I'll leave it at that.
It might be too trite, but there's a really direct connection between creativity and physical wellness right there. Right? get your steps, but I totally resonate with that. I think that there's something freeing about being in motion. It's very cool. All right, so let's hear from you both. I'm gonna just say that we're gonna close out with your words, because I think that anything that I would say after them just wouldn't do the trick. So let's just have both of you do your words. And to everybody who's been able to join us today, thank you so much for being here. And please, reach out to me directly. I'm just simply ian.ayers@du.edu, and let me know if you have any other ideas for things that you want us to do. Certainly reach out to Chase as well. But let's just let the two of you carry us into the rest of our day.
And I'll just say I don't have anything else lined up to say, so I'm going to feed to Bobby to bring us home. If that's okay with you, Bobby. I don't mean to put you on the spot.
I'm on mute. Yeah, that's perfect. I did want to say, though, about your last reading, I have a poem that I wrote that's similar to that. It's a list of things that just are seemingly mundane, right? But you took me to a place in that reading of groundedness, and I found myself imagining the world outside in quarantine, right? So you're talking about the parallels to how this really relates to what we're doing now, and some of those things I miss, but again, like, there are so many things happening around us all the time, and very rarely do we pay attention to the little moments in life. But in those little moments, there's magic, and the way that you described, the shaving or the click of the gas pump. Those are all things that people thought about. That was an imagined idea, right? The idea of a gas pump that stops when your tank's full. Like, somebody thought of that. That was imagination running wild, right? Everything that we see had some thought considered, unless it's happening in the natural world. Anything that we see was someone's idea. And so I really appreciated that, because it allowed me, I was drifting away in this time. So thank you for your reading and reminding us of the importance of just being conscious of what's around us. I'm going to end with a short poem. It's a part of the series that I told you about called Numbers for Days. And again, right, like, I have poems about everything, celebratory things, nature, beauty. But right now we are focused on other things. And this poem's for Elijah McClain. Hopefully everyone knows who Elijah McClain was, and what happened to him, and how the fight for him and everyone else is ongoing. So I'll end with this poem. This is for Elijah, and it's a part of my Numbers for Days series. 1. The violin is not a simple instrument. It is maple and spruce and more. 70 pieces, a body, a soul, a neck. 2. Elijah was not a simple man. He was black and kind and more. Many pieces, a body, a soul, a neck. 3. Carotid holds compress the arteries in the neck, resulting in unconsciousness. 4. Research shows violinists have faster cognitive processing speeds than the average person. Maybe this is why, in that moment, Elijah tried reason, why he tried humanity, why he tried compassion, why he tried love, why he tried apologizing. 5. Maybe Elijah was trying to string his words into a bow. Maybe he thought he could slide that bow across the F-holes of the pigs' ears. Maybe he believed their hearts were capable of resounding music. Maybe he thought for a second that the cops would do their job and police the gross imaginations in their mind. Thank you. Justice for Elijah McClain, y'all.